So the USA, they are addicted to debt. You might have noticed. About $33 trillion right now. It's trillion with a T. A T. Can you imagine that amount of money? That's like a skyscraper of money. Probably skyscrapers of money. Oh, man, oh, man, oh, man, oh, man, oh, man. You know, it's an absolutely wild situation when you think about the irresponsibility of a government that lets that much debt pile up. Because at the end of the day, the politicians, it's not really their problem. The corporations, it's not really their problem either. Whose problem is it? It's your problem as a taxpayer. And of course, that becomes the rest of the world's problem, because if the USA runs into some kind of default event at some point in the future, whatever it might be, like, everybody's going to have problems then, because that is not a good situation for anybody anywhere. Now, I want to share this chart here from Charlie Balelo. He says the U.S. national debt has now increased by $1.45 trillion since the debt ceiling was suspended 3 months ago. I just want you to think about that for a second. Because in 3 months, the USA has added $1.45 trillion of new debt. He says in the past 5 years, the national debt has increased by 53% from $21.4 trillion to $32.9 trillion. These are numbers that are hard to even understand. This is debt slavery of an entire nation that we're witnessing here. $1.5 trillion in 3 months is a scandal. It's a scandal. How this has been allowed to happen is mind-blowing. But the U.S. government's broke. They don't have enough money. They spend almost 50% more than they take in revenue. So that means that the debt continues to increase dramatically. And the interest that'll need to be paid on that debt is soon going to be the number one line item, U.S. expenses. It will replace even the military. So U.S. spending will go debt, and then military, and then a tiny sliver of pie for everything else. But the question is, what happens to $33 trillion in debt, estimated to be $50 trillion by 2030? What are the scenarios here? Does the U.S. pay that back? Probably not. If the U.S. stops spending on everything right now, everything, literally they shut down all public services and pay like nobody anything, everything's cut, it would still probably take them 15 years to pay back the money they owe on the debt. That's impossible, of course. They can't just stop 100% of government spending. Whew. Yeah. So does the USA simply default and not pay anybody that $33 trillion? Whoops, sorry guys, our bad. Well, I don't think anybody wants to see the United States of America default on their debt. That is a bad situation. The debt to GDP ratio is estimated to continue skyrocketing. And we're getting to the levels now where basically once we see these kinds of ratios for debt, things get out of control real quick. But can the USA print their way out of this nightmare? Maybe. The problem, though, is that increasingly we are seeing the people who have usually been the buyers of U.S. debt not being as interested in buying U.S. debt anymore. People are starting to notice, like, hey, these guys are kind of broke. And yeah, they can keep printing money because they have the global reserve currency, but for how long? And as we see China, for example, reducing its U.S. Treasury holdings, as we see other countries reducing the U.S. Treasury holdings, moving to gold, you do have to wonder, can the USA realistically print its way out of this mess? And of course, if they did try to print their way out of this mess, what happens then? Nothing good. Now, they printed $4 or $5 trillion or something like that during the Mexican beer crisis. And that sent inflation soaring. So, what happens when they try to print $35 trillion to pay off the debt? Doesn't work. Doesn't work. The US dollar will be worth it'll be like toilet paper money. It'll turn into like the Venezuelan bolivar or something. So they can't necessarily print that much money because it'll just crush the value of the dollar in such an extreme way. So they just keep adding more debt forever. At some point, the interest on the debt becomes too much. I mean, I maybe you can let me know in the comments section. What's the realistic way out of this situation? Because I just don't see it. Can't cut spending that much, can't print that much money. At some point, the interest on the debt will outweigh all tax revenue if they let this keep going the way that it has been. They're just kicking the can down the road. They're just digging a deeper hole. And outside of some catastrophic event, and I see a few people in the comment sections, well, it's going to have to be war. I hope not. I hope it doesn't result in World War III. I hope that, that nothing bad happens. But unfortunately, when you see this kind of stuff happening, it makes you think something bad's probably going to happen. And that scares me, of course, as a human who lives in this world. It scares me for my children. It scares me for the future of everyone everywhere. It scares me for what could happen to people in America. It scares me for what could happen to people globally. Not a great situation. Not a great situation by any means. So, yeah. And it's only getting worse, of course, with the rise of BRICS. Now, before we get into that, I just want to make a quick note to you. If you're not signed up to the newsletter yet, you got to get it checked out. This is the best newsletter in the cryptocurrency space. Seriously, every single issue is just packed full of alpha for you. Me and my team, we spend about 40 hours a week writing this every single week. Get 3 newsletters a week to your inbox, just full of value on altcoins and DeFi and the latest news. There's airdrop alpha and much, much more. You can sign up for free and join our 75,000 weekly readers by using the link in the description, or you can go to thewealthmastery.io and get signed up there. So go ahead and check it out if you want to start getting all the latest from the crypto space straight to your inbox. Now, I wanted to share this headline with you. Western officials plan to warn the UAE over trade with Russia. Now, the new members of BRICS have immediately started getting a lot of negative attention from Western officials. We saw, of course, there was an almost immediate restriction of semiconductor sales into the Middle East. Of course, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Iran have all joined. It's very interesting. This is an economic war happening. And it's an economic war happening because the global superpower right now is running on empty. Their debt is a real problem. It's an unsustainable problem. And the more people move away from the US dollar, the less they have the ability to continue to take on new debt and to continue to print their way out of this. And countries like the UAE, for example, big oil producer, they have started doing oil sales to India for rupees, to China for yuan. They don't like that. The Western officials, they don't like that because that challenges the supremacy of the petrodollar. In the USA, without the petrodollar, probably going to be in a bit of trouble because when countries stop needing to have the dollar sitting in their central bank in order to buy oil, when they can start just saying, hey, we can use Chinese yuan or Indian rupees or South African rand or whatever to buy oil and gas and corn and whatever with, we're going to do that instead. Maybe we can even use our own local currencies and that'll be accepted abroad. That becomes very, very, very interesting. And of course, very dangerous because, as I've said before, the petrodollar is not going to go quietly into the night, unfortunately. Oh, yeah. And then you see it on the back of stuff like this. This is from Goldman Sachs. So Goldman Sachs, once again, reducing the chances of a U.S. recession back down to 15% from 20%, which was their earlier estimate. This change reflects continued encouraging inflation news, a favorable real outcome outlook, and the decline in job workers gap. Interesting. Of course, that's just some dude's opinion over at Goldman Sachs. We are seeing oil prices starting to inch up as Saudi Arabia and Russia are cutting production in order to bring the price of oil higher, which makes sense for them. Why sell your oil for cheaper? You can just keep it in the ground. Sell less of it for more money. It's an interesting situation, and I don't know where we go with this U.S. debt problem, but it is a problem. I think anybody looking at it can recognize it as a problem, and it becomes even more of a problem with the rise of BRICS because countries are starting to not use the dollar for oil and gas purchases, which completely challenges the narrative of U.S. dollar dominance globally. And countries, of course, are tired of the threats. Here, the UAE is just trying to do their business, and suddenly they get someone coming in. No, you're not allowed to do that. Uncle Sam said no. And the UAE is like, what? Are we children? We can trade with whoever. We are a sovereign nation. We can buy oil from those guys. We can sell oil to these guys. We can do business where we want with the currencies that we want. You are not our boss. Now, 10 years ago, they would be pretty damn bold to pull that kind of move. In 2023, with the backing of major global powers, they feel more emboldened. Interesting times to be living in. What's the saying? If you have to live at any time, make sure you live in interesting times. Well, my friends, we're living in interesting times, without a doubt.